Okay, we are live, Jess. I think
Are
so.
we?
How's it going? Yeah, I have somebody who says so we got it's okay. So we don't have anybody online yet. So because I see viewers, so 0 people. So we'll give it a little bit.
It's
And then
weird being live on LinkedIn without being in LinkedIn.
yeah, I'm gonna jump into LinkedIn and see what it does if I let's see. What does this do? So the event will start soon. Wait for the host to start. So on LinkedIn, it just says starting. Okay. Oh, hey. Okay. So it is live.
We're officially live.
Okay. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's live. It's on LinkedIn. It doesn't look like there's anybody there yet. So we'll give it a couple minutes. Yeah. Okay, sweet. We are live. I don't know why the numbers aren't showing it, but I just got a text from my friend that says we're live. So we'll go ahead and get started. Have no idea how many people are with us, but for everybody who is with us, I'm super excited to have you. My name's Matt Jertson. I'm here with Jess Salidi. Really excited. Jess, you want to say hi?
Hi. Excited to be here on LinkedIn, apparently.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really excited for the discussion today because
wondering who's watching.
Yeah, it's always weird when you're live. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today because as nerdy as this topic is of controlling the training chaos, I honestly think it's one of the most important things for all training professionals, especially if you're a small team in a company or, I like to say, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, Jess, but I like to say learning teams very often find themselves in one of two positions. Either they are in the position where the company doesn't know about them and they have nothing to do, right? And they're just like really trying to prove their worth. They're out there. They're just like, oh, come on, we can do this. We can help you. And that's a tough position to be in. And it's where a lot of the discussion is. I think a lot of people forget sometimes that the other position is the business knows that you're there and there's just this unending avalanche of requests, right? And very often you will go from one to the other really quickly. And honestly and ultimately, like, controlling that, figuring out how to control that chaos is what we're talking about today. The reason why I'm so passionate about it is because it's the situation I found myself in when I first joined SpaceX, right? And this is a meme that I think a lot of people can relate to, where you're just always behind. You're getting, requests from all over the place. You're getting requests from email. You're getting requests from just random conversations. People are maybe sending you instant messages or Slacks or whatever, and you just always feel underwater. Ultimately, because you don't have a complete sense of what you need to get done, and you don't have any method to kind of bring it all together. You don't have any method to lay out all the requests that are coming in and have a rational discussion about what to do. And so when we think about, bringing this chaos under control, ultimately what worked for me at SpaceX is a really simple process of setting up some kind of online form or some kind of online intake, whatever it is, whether it's an email, whether it's a form, having a single place for requests to go to. And that's something that you have to figure out how to set up as a learning team. Then what that does is those requests all kind of get compiled, and then you can have a conversation about those requests. You can talk to the people who submit them. You can talk to your boss. You can figure out priorities. But ultimately, at a really big picture level, when it comes to figuring out how to control the training chaos, this is really what you're doing. You're setting up some kind of online form so that you can compile all these requests, and then you can have conversations about them. As you can probably tell, I'm really passionate about this, but I always, I have a podcast. Yeah, I talk a lot about it. So Jess, this is where I want you to come in, because you are passionate about this too. Yes. Can you give us a little bit of your background and then lead into really get into the meat of what we're talking about?
Yeah, of course. So I think that, well, first of all, my background is in education. I started out as a classroom teacher. I pretty much had, every job imaginable, in education, between like college professor, research assistant, everything in between. And I think that is connected somehow, which I'll get to. But I left the classroom. I left graduate school, and I was back out of school, and I found Idol Academy, which led me down the path of instructional design. I was like, wow, I've been doing this since 2008. Let me do this in a different way. So I, in looking for a job, I ended up as a training content developer at FM Systems, which I love. But what brought me to meet you is I was feeling that back and forth, like you just described, from wait, what am I supposed to be doing today? Like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. What am I supposed to be making? To, oh my God, there's so many requests. I'm not sure what to do first. So, and I think it's interesting because, first of all, I love that meme because that's one of my favorite memes to send to people.
Absolutely.
So that was a great choice. But I think that on that note is that chaos doesn't always feel like chaos, right? When you're in it. Because this is how I felt, because it didn't really necessarily feel chaotic. I just had to pause and think there's got to be a better way, And so sometimes it's a little bit more subtle like that. So what the situation,
I think it feels like the way, like the chaos, you can get used to the chaos, or the chaos can seem kind of natural. It doesn't necessarily seem like you have to do what you did of take a second, be like, wait, maybe there's a better way to do this.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that it kind of goes back to that, what we hear too often is like, well, that's just, that's the way it's been done, or people are just in it, and especially as a new employee, you're like, but, in that, I was personally feeling like back and forth. Anyway, I was listening to your podcast, Making Better, on my morning walk, and I listened to an episode, I think it was Sarah Carroll. I honestly don't even, she was at Pinterest, I think. Pinterest ad training or something like that. I can't remember, but yeah, anyway, it was one of those episodes that was like so specific, so contextual. It had such a great takeaway, and it was that intake thing that you were just describing. And I was like, I could do this, and I could do that. I could do this right now, which is what I loved. And I think I told you this, but something I loved in that episode was that you specifically called out, this is not the time where you're getting a new vendor. You're going to look for hey, who does intake forms good? You're not doing that. That you are somehow integrating into the system that already exists for you. And I think
hopefully that's definitely the goal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where I found success in this. And it's a little different because, I know I do customer education versus internal, but the same rules apply. Right. So yeah.
So this is ultimately what you kind of built.
Exactly. Yeah. So after listening to that podcast, so it's funny because in the episode you talk about use something like Jira or Monday or whatever, and so I was on my way home thinking I was going to put it in Jira, I'll figure this out. I do a form in Jira or do a ticket. I don't know. Let's do this. And then I sat. By the time I got to my computer, I was like, this team doesn't use that. That's a different team. So I switched gears. Monday.com I was already being asked to put something in there similar to this, right? So I took a form that already existed for since 2019, and I just added the intake form to the front. That was literally all I did. And this is what it looked like. The previous system was perfectly fine. It was Teams pinging, that kind of thing. I have a client who needs this training. Here, what are the dates available? Here are some dates. It was just a little bit of a back and forth, right? So this is something I made. Yeah.
If I could pause you for a second, because if I remember our original conversation, we talked a little bit before, kind of to just dive a little bit deeper into what you just said. Training requests were just coming to you, and then you were all, and then after the training request came to you through, was it Slack, you said, or Teams?
Teams, yeah.
Teams, then you would manually go kind of create a ticket in monday.com to track that request. And so you just kind of flipped that and said, okay, well, if we're in Monday already, if it ends up there anyway, let's just put this on the front end.
Yes, exactly. Because everyone has to track everything, right? Like, it's going to have to be put in your calendar somehow. You're going to have to keep track of your hours. You're going to have to send those hours to, somebody at some point. Like, you are tracking it, right? Like, but let's just be efficient about it. And, I could go on and on about this, but then from there, then you can, automate it. You could be getting emails when there's a new request. There's so many places you can go once you have that form, that intake. You can collect data on it. You could go nuts.
Yeah.
I told you I was just as nerdy as about these intakes forms that you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I could elaborate on any of this. I think that some things that stood out in that episode were like, as minimal as possible. Like, if you can, it's hard to see here, but the least amount of required questions humanly possible. Like, who are they and what do they need to learn? That's like almost all you need to know sometimes, right? So, and I think that, using drop-down menus, like, just make it just as quick as the previous method, if not quicker. So I think that, is helpful.
I think that's one of the things that L&D professionals sometimes run into when we first are trying to legitimately improve things. A good example of this is, vetting training requests. And I think we have all heard of the feeling that people don't like, in some companies, people don't like asking for training because, then they have to sit down for a meeting and there's going to be all this back and forth and there's going to be all this pushback. And it stems from a legitimately good place where we are trying to make sure this is a valid training request, but we have to do it in the appropriate way, in a way that doesn't seem too confrontational or create too much friction. And it's the exact same thing here. We have this new thing that we want people to do because we know it's going to bring more control, it's going to reduce the chaos of all of this stuff. So we're coming at it from a good place, but we have to make sure we don't accidentally put in too much friction, especially in the beginning. What are some of the things you've seen as a result of this? How is that, you mentioned before, you were just kind of back and forth of like, what should I be doing? Oh my gosh, there's so much to do. Has that kind of tempered?
Yeah, no, yes, I think that and I also, what I love about it is that it gives it a home, right? So like, now you have a space for that to exist. So, it removes that constant check-in and like a stand-up or a team meeting of like, do we have any requests? Because everyone knows where they live, right? It's kind of that thing. I think that, I totally forgot what I was going to say when you were saying that before. Oh, about the meeting first. I wanted to say something about that, is because I think that a way in, especially for internal L&D teams, is to make things more productive earlier, like get value faster, those kinds of things. And I think that what you were just talking about is the internal request intake is like, well, think about how much more productive that meeting could be, right? Like, if I got an intake and I know what team is being taught, what subset of that team, is it the whole team? Is it the new people, whatever? And you, give me a link to some content that I could absorb. We can still have that same meeting, but we're going to move the needle so much further because, you're coming in with context. You're coming in with ideas. The L&D teams, they're constantly spinning ideas. So I think that, it can be valuable in so many ways, and I can go on and on in so many different ways. So tell me if you want me to lead it.
Well, I think, because we kind of, as you and I went kind of back and forth on your experience and my experience, we kind of broke it down to these 3 basic rules that we can walk through. And we've touched on them, but I think it's really important to emphasize these. So the first rule, as you mentioned, is use an existing system. Now, I know I would venture to say that most companies out there probably have some kind of project management tool in place, whether that's Jira, Monday, Asana. I'm trying to think of all the ones that I've used. And so the more, because just like we all know, the worst thing if you're trying to learn something or you're trying to teach somebody or getting ready for some new learning initiative, one of the worst things you can do is introduce a new technology with that new learning initiative, because now you're having to train two things, right? You're having to train the thing that you want to train, but then you also have to train them on how to use the thing that's gonna train them on the thing you want to train, right? And so, and
Yeah,
it's
no,
this, yeah, go
absolutely.
for it.
And just to add to that is like, if there's somehow not a system, use Google Forms, use the
Yeah,
free
yeah,
job form.
yeah,
Like, let's
yeah,
make it stupid simple,
yeah,
right? Like, and
yeah,
it's funny because it's not, go back to the education thing, but like, I was doing this in like 2009 with a free Google site. I had like, parents could fill out a form to eat, like this has existed for a while, right? Like, it doesn't
yeah.
need to be complicated. So yeah, simple.
Yeah, so keeping it simple, using something that people already use. In fact, I would even venture to say I've seen this before. There are plenty of companies where some kind of ticketing system was first introduced by IT because
Yes.
they needed some kind of form to track IT tickets. It's one of the first ticketing things that becomes needed as a company grows.
Right.
And they might be, they have an expense that they have to pay, and they might be struggling to justify that expense. That people might be cutting costs, and chances are they're looking for other people to adopt their system because like they bought it, they brought it in, and now it's like, oh, like, come on, let's do this. And so if you're in that situation, you're making friends, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're going to find these people. Oh yeah, you got this thing, like, that's awesome. Conversely, if you're in a situation where there are multiple, it sounds like you were in this situation where there were multiple kind of project management or ticketing, like, because it sounds like part of your company
Yeah,
was using
yeah, and I
Jira.
think
Is that right?
I think that's a common thing, to see
Yeah.
is like every team kind of adopts their own
Yep. Yep.
thing.
Yep.
But I think that, nowadays you can just connect them all together. But yeah, no, you're
Yeah.
right.
You can.
And I
Yeah.
think that if you are in that position where there is multiple, like I was saying before, is either use what's easiest, easiest for you to get out there, easiest for people to fill out, or go for what that team prefers, right? Like, who are the people filling it out? Where do they live? Like, for me,
Yeah.
this team spends half their day in there, if not more, right? So that was a good place, but that would
Yeah.
change with the team.
Yeah. At my last company, I mean, it can sometimes, depending on your company, it can sometimes come down to almost a political decision, in the sense that at my last company, there were, exactly like you said, the company had grown really fast. Different teams were using different systems. And there was almost a point where we, as the training team, kind of had to sit back and just kind of like read the room, almost just be like, what's the direction that this is going? And what do we think people are most likely going to want to do? But yeah, so lots of different ways this can work out, but do something simple, use an existing system. That's the first major rule. The second rule, again, once you decide on a system, the form itself, you want to be as simple as
Yes.
possible. You already mentioned this. I do think one thing that if you actually have real software like Monday or Jira, one thing that they often allow is for you to have questions that are on the initial intake form, and then other stuff that you fill out down the road. And so just because on the initial intake you ask for who's the requester, what's the point, how many people, you have to ask like 3 questions. That
Yes.
doesn't mean that's all the information you're ever going to get. But to your point, and going back to the point we've been making about adoption, you want to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, you're right about that with the Jira thing. Cause like, think about an IT ticket or, a support ticket, you're constantly going back and forth through that system. And in that, you're collecting amazing data on training needs and training requests and content and all these other things. And if you have a system in place, you have that at your fingertips, right? So I think that centralizing it is just, needs to happen.
Yeah, yeah, and I think in terms of, and this can be how simple it needs to be is totally going to depend on the environment that you're in, And I think, it looked like from your form, it was super bare bones. It was just who's the requester, what's the course, and then like an open text field for any additional information. I think for me, one of the number one things that I did when I was at SpaceX that we did is the first question that we wanted to answer for any request is, what's the priority? And so we had one thing that I would recommend: never just put priority as like a box that they fill out, because everyone is going to say hi. But you can ask yourself the question, okay, what information do I need to determine this priority? And that could be questions, like, how many people is this going to affect? At a place like, if you're in manufacturing like SpaceX, what's the risk here? Is it loss of life or injury? Is it damage to equipment or product? You could have a drop down kind of thing like that. But that's the one thing that I could potentially add in, is like at the most basic level, you need to know who's making the request and what the request is. That's at the most basic level. The only thing I could potentially add in there is something to help figure out priority. But honestly, that only matters if like you're just getting like more requests than you could ever like even get to. Because probably totally the first thing, yeah, exactly. Because the first thing you're going to do is probably like start having a discussion or set up a meeting, and so you can just as easily get the information there. And then step 3 for the rules to follow, I think, again, most of these are about adoption, because just like any system, just like social media, there's network effects. And so if people aren't using the system, then there's no point in the system. And so a lot of these rules are about user adoption. And to get that user adoption, the final one is finding ways to show users value. Were there any particular ways that you found you showed the value for users to use your system?
Yes. Now I was like, can I take this one? But no, I'm just kidding. I'm excited about this part of it because, can you actually go back to the other slide? Because I was deciding if I should talk about it now. So so I think all 3 of these things on the right are examples of providing value to the external team, not the training team, right? So who are you partnering with here? And none of these are required. So as I said before, sometimes you can find yourself in like a back and forth with scheduling. If you check the box, then this copy and paste email thing pops up. It's a trigger. So then I could take that scheduling off their plate. So I think that's providing value. And it's truly not giving us any more time because we're already in that back and forth with them. So I think that's one way to provide value.
And just to highlight on that, this is kind of going back to the specifics of your situation, right? Where you were working with customer education. So there was there's like an account manager inside the company, there's you, and then there's the customer outside the company. Exactly. And this is a box that the account manager can check and just be like, I don't need to worry about this. You can handle it directly with them. It definitely helps you because it gives you this control. Like you said, it's not costing you anything because you're having to have back and forths anyway. And it helps them because there's this whole thing that it just takes off their plate.
Exactly. And that brings me to the next one, like make it so simple that they can open up that the board or whatever is connected to that form if they have access, in this case they do, so they could glance at it real quick and see like in this orange pending PM, like, okay, I forgot. Let me go with my email. I'm supposed to be scheduling this, like very quick, and which is also connected to the external dashboard. Like, you can really take this so far and give them a reason to come back, right? Or give them a reason to want to talk about adoption. It's a product, right? Training is a product always. So I think that, you need to provide that value. You need to provide those extra features just like product does and show, here, I actually made a dashboard for you. And I did. You broke it up by project manager. So I could go to that PM dashboard and I could find my name and I could see all my clients, right? These people are busy, like so incredibly busy. They need things instantly at their fingertips. Some other thing we did was we provided like the course outline So, if they wanted to copy and paste that, or, show their client something like that, just as much value as you can, but that is added bonuses, right? Those extra things are not part of the required. And about that, actually, you don't have to stay on this slide, but you can go back to the other one. But when you were talking before about like, keep it simple, it's funny because I did do this in Monday, and I was thinking, I told you last night, I was like, I could probably show a Jira example too. So I was looking at their template. I mean, I'm a template girl myself. I don't use them exactly as is, but they spark that, creativity for me. So I was looking at them, and I love Atlassian products. I really do, but their templates were so long, and I was
no.
multiple pages, like it was like page breaks. And I was like, no, this isn't gonna work. So I thought I think that, delete if you're starting there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just to highlight some of that stuff, that is the nice thing that can happen about using some of these more advanced products, because you can make these dashboards, because you can show statuses, show other requests. It just makes really easy one-stop shops. I think the one final thing I'll add to this, kind of around user adoption, that once you get all this in place, once you have something, just accept the fact that there is no system or product that is good enough that everyone will just start using it. That'll just be a frictionless transfer. No matter what you do for the first 3, 6, 12 months, maybe forever, you will still get Slack messages, team messages, emails. Those requests will still come in. And I think it's up to you, for your own personality, for the personality of your company, to push back in the way that's appropriate for your culture, right? And I am an extremely hesitant person. I'm always just like, oh, should I just go make the ticket for them? And sometimes for some people, I will do that. But I highly recommend, it's teach a person to fish. Don't give them a fish. Just have some canned message over here that you can cut and paste. Just like, thanks for this request. Can you open up a ticket here? It's going to make sure we serve you a lot faster.
Yes, absolutely. And it's funny about your hesitation. I think a good segue between that is the first time, maybe, oh yeah, I put that into the board for you, or I filled out the Monday form for you. And the next time, here's the link, right? So I think they're, and you're right. And you are never going to get everyone to adopt anything, right? It's just, it's human nature.
And of course, there's always, I worked at an Elon Musk company. If the president or the CEO says hey, we need something, you're not going to have them fill out their own training request. You're going to do it for them. There's always certain, those directors, there's things like that. You're always
I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah. Can you please? No, that wouldn't work. Awesome. So this has been great, Jess. If for anybody who wants to listen to the initial conversation that kind of inspired this was the email managing training requests. Check out the Making Better podcast. It was from quite a while ago. I think I put the link in the comments. And then one final thing that I'll bring up is at Better Every Day Studios, we just created this thing called the Talent Launch System, that is meant to be kind of a framework for L&D teams to think about how to have an impact on the business, how to design learning programs targeted at impact. You can get that for free using this QR code right here. I'd love for you to download it, shoot me back any information. I know you've been taking a look at it, and you said you actually saw some parallels.
I highly recommend it. It's applicable to a wide range. Like we said, I'm not an internal L&D team, but I still found tremendous value. And I think it just takes what we're saying, takes this approach to scale. So if you were going to adopt this approach, similar, obviously not exactly those 3 rules, but if this, is resonating with you, it's that for a whole program. So I loved it. I love the quotes.
Awesome.
Down to the quotes.
Yeah. There's so many good quotes out there.
There really are.
Well, you got to be careful though, because if you just look up quotes, you're going to find some, fake ones or fishy ones, and you got to do your research, I feel like.
It is true.
Jess, well, thank you so much for being on. This was a blast. I'm really glad you reached out to me after that first episode. I'm really glad you were willing to do this, and I'm really glad this made a difference for you. yeah, I'm super glad that it made a difference for you and your team. Let me see if I can make sure. Oh, okay. So they just asked me to put the link in the chat. For some reason, it's not letting me put the. I'm using. For some reason, StreamYard isn't letting me put things in the LinkedIn chat. It's only letting me put them in the YouTube chat. I'm not sure why. So I'll go into. I'll put a post about this on LinkedIn and just be like, hey, if you're interested, then here's where you can find it. Awesome. Yes. Let's see. We had one other question. Yeah, Bonnie, thank you for being here, Bonnie. Yes, some great tips. Design can be important. Yeah, for how you're designing these things, the order you ask questions, how easily you make them. Yeah, the user interface is
that
definitely important.
Reminds me, fill out your own form.
Ooh, yes. Before you go live with it, try to fill out your own form. That's definitely a good rule of thumb. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again, Jess. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm so excited. And everybody have a great rest of your day and rest of the week.
Yeah, enjoy.